Hello and welcome to Liftoff. I'm Saima Siddiqui, the co-founder and CEO of Grad Greenhouse, and joining me today is Karen Leong, global keynote speaker and director and co-founder of Influence Solutions. Karen, welcome.
Hi, Sarma. Such a pleasure to be speaking with you today.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Karen, you're one of the most influential speakers and sought after speakers in Singapore. You're a celebrated author, coach, global thought leader on leadership, transformation, and influence. I would love to have us start off by hearing your story. How did you get here? What was your career journey like?
Saima, I think one thing is I really love, this connection with you because, we also go way back. But if you were to ask me and look back at my early career, I have to say that I started in one of the international accounting firms, but everything went really nicely until the third year. So that's a little tidbit for you because I was called into my audit partner's office and he said, Karen, I want to tell you something that your manager recommended you not be promoted. So I looked at him and I'm like, okay, tell me more. And he says, Karen, you see, you are just not that great in audit. And in my heart, I agreed with him because I absolutely loved the business of numbers, but I hated accounting for them and all those minute details. So my irritation and boredom definitely showed. But I have to say that he then went on to tell me something which was really mind-blowing. He said, I'm gonna just overrule and promote you anyway, because you're somebody that has great people skills, and we need that around here. And I just want to say that, that was one of the biggest lessons, kind of life-changing lessons that I had, because when I started to focus more on developing my people skills, within about a couple of months, I was headhunted to join the consulting arm of the same firm. And I have to say that consulting was a game changer. I loved it. I mean, literally, I threw myself into it. I really thrived in solving bigger and bigger problems for the clients, but also because it really threw me in the deep end of dealing with people. So, and I've got more and more stories to share, but I have to say that I've got lots of failure stories. So I thought I just wanted to start up by just sharing how my career started in the corporate world.
So how did that, you were young at that time. You've always been, having known you, as you said, for a long time, you've always been a top performer. You've excelled probably in, most everything that you've done. And so at that moment when you were sitting in that office and you got this, you had an inkling that maybe numbers weren't the thing that you loved the most that inspired you to get out of bed in the morning. But how did you react in that moment to that feedback? It must have been quite difficult and a little bit jarring to get that feedback. And how did you turn it into such a positive? Obviously you were promoted anyway, but because I find that especially when your early career, it's difficult to deal with honest feedback, especially for those of us who have been, overperformers. What was that moment like, and how did you process it?
Yeah, I realized, it was difficult for me because my ego just it was crushed. Okay. And everybody gets promoted, in those early days. But what I've realized is that feedback is such a powerful gift. I have to say that I was so stunned, but yet I was also so grateful to get it from like the big boss, in all honesty. And I have to say that he and I became really good friends. After I left, we became really good friends, and he even engaged me for like coaching conversations. But I think that is actually the game changer. Being able to get authentic, truthful feedback. And I've always wondered that, and I'm just going to invite anybody who's listening to this, is that if you think you're not getting enough constructive, candid feedback, then it's a good time to ask yourself, why is that so? Am I not proactively seeking it? Or am I not responding to it, with a growth mindset or with an open heart when I do get that feedback? Because it takes effort for people to share something that is open and honest, and sometimes may not make the other person feel good, but actually is crucial for growth. So I really love the diversity. I have to say that I feel that my consulting career has kind of made me bulletproof or future proof, because you really deal with all kinds of clients. I mean, we were doing business process engineering and a bit of IT consulting as well. So we were really dealing with the heart of any client's business. And I learned to be good at being 2 or 3 steps ahead, because things were changing. It's not possible to know everything. And I think that is the mindset that I realized I had accidentally honed, because when I started Influence Solutions, now we are working with clients across so many different industries in 30 over countries, that it's not possible for us to know everything about the client's business, but it is not important either. And in fact, I have to say, sometimes it is more of an enabler, that we do not go into we do not have that client's perspective. We have our own external perspective, because it helps us to expand the world of solutions.
So Influence Solutions, your company, I was reflecting today just on the choice of name and on the choice of, Influence Solutions being sort of the moniker. Can you talk about influence? I mean, it's a very, like, its role in an organization and why you selected that name and how you sort of built a business around it.
I have to say that sometimes we choose a name to be around a skill that we wish we had.
Mm.
So it was something that, I mean, as a shy child, when I was young, I can remember my mom wanted to take me to see a psychiatrist because I just didn't talk or didn't make friends. And, but then I realized it wasn't.
Imagine little Karen.
So it's incredible. She was so concerned. But then it wasn't because I had a social disorder. I was just shy. And it took me a while to kind of learn. And I realized that, these social muscles can be developed. And that's when I realized how powerful influence is. Because you can exercise influence regardless of your age, your gender, your profile, your personality type, your socioeconomic status. And that itself, whenever we are working with people, that is the key to making anything happen. So that's why we thought, we have had so many clients to come to us with problems. So let us give them the solutions, of which influence is the foundation. And when we realized that when we help our clients who are dealing with, say, change management issues, they're dealing with leadership issues, or people not stepping up, not being more innovative, there is lack of productivity, they want greater performance. You see, all of this is around people. And that is when we discovered, that helping people to realize that there is a process. And they can activate it because they already are influential. That helps us to then, forge influences throughout the organization. And ultimately, it's to help the organization be fair. So we talk about future ready, helping the organization be future ready, innovative, relevant, strategic, and trusted. So we've been doing this for well more than a decade, and I can imagine doing this till I'm like 88 years old. Hopefully I live that.
Can you talk a little bit about, one of the things that, as we enter the new world of work, as people are talking about, and I'd love to hear more from your perspective about what you've been seeing over the past 18 months, but really it's a different world for students who are graduating, or young people entering the workforce for the first time, or even just entering a new organization where you haven't been before, where you don't have relationships, how what, could you share some thoughts and maybe recommendations, or maybe an example of something that people can do to build maybe trust and influence, because I assume they're kind of tied together, and I'd be interested to hear what you think, because what I'm seeing a lot of is that there's a lot of because people don't know their coworkers, you're building these relationships via Microsoft Teams or Zoom, and they may be a little tenuous, and we're finding that there's a lot of turnover among new entrants into the workforce, because consulting firm A is the same as consulting firm B when you're not bought into the culture and you don't feel a sense of belonging. So I would love some sort of actionable or any recommendations of what you've seen that people do well to build community, build trust, build influence. I know I'm kind of amalgamating those, but really, how do you do this when you can't sit and have coffee together?
A lot of, when the pandemic first started, a lot of clients actually struggled with virtual communication. But then, actually, virtual communication is just really a mode. Because if I invite people to think, if you had a long distance relationship and you were talking to your, overseas boyfriend or girlfriend, that love would still come forth whether you're doing it on Zoom. So a lot of times, it's actually the intention that drives the connection. So let me give you an example. I mean, maybe I'll give you a difficult example, because I've got people struggling not just with connecting with colleagues, but even especially connecting with bosses, whether it's virtually or in these stressful times. And I'll share with you a story. I was coaching one of my so she's a senior manager, and she had a lot of issues with connecting with her boss. And again, it's very on a need-to basis. There was a lot of negative vibes, and she says, whenever he talks, sometimes I lose my train of thought. So it wasn't a healthy relationship. And so then I asked her, okay, so if you were to think of one word that, the first word that comes to mind, what is it? And then she said, he's difficult. So, and so I said, okay, so I can imagine, anybody who's difficult, you will do exactly what you said. You will try not to connect with him unless a problem occurs. And even when you are, you don't even want to connect with him socially. She says, absolutely. So I invited her, what if you were to change that word into a neutral word? Something that is really close, but it's still something that you can replace the word with. So I'm just curious, Summer, if you had to replace a word, what would your word be?
Oh my goodness, I was just thinking, what is a neutral word for difficult? I don't know.
It took a while. I mean, you're right. I mean, we brainstormed quite a bit, and she finally came up with one word that she liked. And so she said, I like the word high expectation. And I invited her, why don't, every time you connect with the boss, replace difficult with high expectation. And when we met for the next coaching conversation about 1 month later, she said, you know what? Things have really changed around here. And
wow.
And I'm going to invite you also. I mean, I'm sure you also would know that, if your boss had high expectations, what is the natural instinct? We would try to meet those high expectations. And that was what she discovered. She found that she was, actually reaching out and seeking his advice more. And interestingly, because she was responding in a different way, he also responded differently. And soon she said, the word that I have for him now is mentor. And you can imagine, it's a huge, huge shift. And so that what I want to invite in everybody is that very often influence starts from within. We can Google. I mean, if you Google how to influence a person, you have like, millions of blog posts and articles telling you how to do that. But really, it's about uncovering the psychology, the deep-seated psychology of influence, and just understanding how to just make that small shift that can change the game. And so we believe in making very small shifts that allow us to be authentic, but yet very empowered. Yeah.
That's an amazing example. I mean, it's just completely reframing, because a lot of times, if the lens that you're using or the filter that you're using is difficult, then everything comes through that lens. Everything is processed through that lens. Whereas seeing your boss or whatever individual you're having a challenging relationship with through a collaborator on mindset, which is also almost what she did when she put on the high expectations filter, because then it was like, okay, we share a common goal of achieving this together. How do we get there, and how can we be partners, and how can I harness this person's insight, since presumably they have experience and insight to share. So beautiful example. Thank you. That was I'm going to implement that in my own life. So thank you very much.
I want to just, because what I love the heart of your podcast, which is to really help people, especially in their early careers, because a small shift in the degree can change the trajectory. And I coach a lot of CEOs, and I also help a lot of organizations with their leadership development. And today, the young people have incredible, incredible power, because there are so many new ideas that you have, and that can lend itself to innovative thinking. Because I remember when I was young, I was always trying to look older. But now, after coaching a lot of senior people, they truly value new ways of thinking, because they value learning from the digital natives. So I would say embrace your youth. I mean, embrace the fact that you are thinking different, and don't be afraid to share it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of organizations are trying to do that, because they realize what you're saying is that they can really whether it's around the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or how to communicate, more authentically using technology, and how to engage. I mean, we're seeing. So I think that's great advice for young folks entering the workforce to bring it, to bring all of that with them, and to share and make the organizations they're entering better. Can you talk a little bit? You mentioned the diversity. We talk a lot about the value of diversity and the ultimate value from a business perspective, that diverse teams are better teams, that diverse teams have better bottom line outcomes. Can you talk a little bit about the value of diversity, whether it's diverse thinking, socioeconomic background, gender, ethnicity, whatever you've seen that sort of played into making an organization or a leadership team that you've worked with stronger, and maybe a little bit about the value of diversity, and how the best companies have really leveraged it and used it as a strength?
I like when you talk about diversity in thinking, because diversity is just not a gender or a culture focus. And I'll share with you a story how diversity is a competitive advantage. Because I was coaching, again, one of a senior leader, and he confided in me. He was very frustrated. He says, I'm just trying to build a more innovative culture, but whenever I ask my people for ideas, no one opens their mouths. So even when I ask point blank, no one does it. And so he was really frustrated. So then I asked him, I said, okay, so let me figure out, tell me more about your asking. Do you often ask before you share an idea or after you share an idea? And he says, But I normally, share everything, and in the last part I ask. So I said, why don't you try switching the sequence? And you'll be amazed and amazing what you get, because in very hierarchical companies, people will not share a different way of thinking if the boss has already put his thinking before on the table. And so he did that. He said, okay, I'm going to practice doing this. And then we talked a little more, and he came up with 2 or 3 other things he was going to do. And when we met again at the next coaching session, he shared with me a really interesting story. He said, Karen, it's been amazing. So I said, tell me why. He says, the first week when I practiced doing this, I kind of reversed the sequencing. Nothing really much happened. And he says, I'm not surprised, because, I've been doing this for 10 years. So you don't expect things to shift overnight. Then he said, then I started being more targeted. I would actually ask people by name. He says, it was the second week that was truly mind-blowing. So I said, tell me more. He said, because I lost my voice. And during one of the meetings, he really literally, he couldn't talk as much as he used to. And he discovered 2 things. He said, Karen, when I just asked people to go ahead and share, I realized that, when they shared their ideas with me, it was almost very close to the idea I had wanted to sell to them. But because it was their idea, I literally was able to appreciate, affirm, and they were far more motivated to make it happen. And the second thing that happened is that, of course, there was a little bit of that 10 to 20% of ideas that need a bit of tweaking. So he used more questions to ask them, what if this problem happened? How would they deal with it? But he realized that, they were also able to offer suggestions to overcome problems that he never knew. And because he also used questions, he was also better able to help them to realize that some of the ideas may not work with his experience. So instead of telling them, they realized it. So, but the main story was that, very often there is incredible creativity, talent, innovative thinking, in the people that we hire. And it's not surprising, because you put a bunch of 10 people who are equally competent, it's not possible that everybody agrees with one another. So one of the key leadership traits that I believe that innovative companies have is really embracing diverse thinking through daily actions. It's as simple as pausing, asking questions, or even making a habit of inviting the youngest persons to speak first. So culture is not something that you put on a fancy, vision statement or even on the website. Culture are behaviors that people do every day, and that alone would go a long way in encouraging people to think for themselves, to share, to take ownership, and that is what I feel has separated companies who are going to win in the next, in this new future. It's really about innovation. And it's about people who feel empowered to speak up and step up.
Is there a company or an example of a leadership team or some behaviors that you saw that really differentiated a company over the past 18 months in terms of how they were able to step up and embrace this new normal and really use it to their advantage?
After having worked with so many companies in the last 10 years, I realized that, that 5-letter word we talked about in the beginning of the podcast, it really is the foundation, which is trust. I think leaders and companies who make trust the focal point, they are the companies that are able to reduce politics. Because people they're not just watching their back, they have enough energy to really bring their best selves to work. So it's about kind of removing obstacles to trust, and that's a direct line to performance, to morale, and to inspiration. So I think one of our mandates, especially it started since the pandemic began, I think sometime early last year, was we had a lot of companies that were struggling with building trust, especially with all these, the stresses in modern life and also virtual communication. And that inspired us to launch our License to Thrill. So that's the virtual team bonding, where the focal point is, how do you bring back authentic conversations where people focus on people, not just the task. And so we have seen that just, creating an experience where we shift away the perceptions and really give a space for people to share what they really think in a constructive way. That has been a visible game changer. Yeah, and that's now our mission, to kind of do it worldwide for more and more companies. So we're working with some of the largest consulting companies and empowering their teams, and they're representing us to help their own clients to change the game around trust.
Fantastic. So I have two more questions for you. One is, what are some characteristics of the most talented people that you've either hired or worked with?
I think there's one thing that is a key differentiator is that ever learning mindset. Because like what I say, talent is overrated, because whatever skill sets that we have today may no longer be relevant 2, 3, or 4 years down the road. So it is really a person with an incredible learning mindset, who is not afraid to learn and pick up and being curious. I think these are the people who are going to thrive. With all that tremendous uncertainty, they will see it as an opportunity. So I think if there's only one thing that would really make us future-proof, it's that growth mindset. And these are the thrivers of the modern day, and these are going to be our innovators and our thinkers. And I want to share with you a story as well. And I was speaking at a panel, and one of my panelists, she had successfully led the digital transformation of her international bank. And then when I talked to her more, I realized that she has no technology background. She's a hardcore banker. So I asked her, I said, it must be really challenging for you to, lead this digital transformation. And she says, yes, in fact, when I decided to take on this role, I was a bit worried and a bit anxious, because I'm a veteran banker. What do I know about tech? Then she said, then I realized that my not knowing is in fact an enabler. Because if I had a tech background, I would have played within the realm of what's possible. But because I didn't have, I was able to play in the realm of what's desirable. Because what does not knowing look like? Not knowing means I was arranging conversations with clients, internal and external, to find out what they really wanted. And I was asking my tech team and able to draw on their expertise and their experience. And I remember, by the time we had such a clear and compelling vision, I asked my tech team, let's make it happen. And they did. They rose to the occasion and they made it happen. So I'm thinking that, the leaders of tomorrow are the people who thrive on not knowing, who see this as a way to think different, to solve the biggest problems to which there are no current solutions. And I think this makes for a very exciting future.
And then my final question to you, what is one piece of advice for somebody starting out their career?
I wish if I were to ask myself when I was, when I was just starting out, what advice would I give to myself? I would say, this story about the 5 regrets of the dying that was compiled by a nurse. And one of the top regrets was something I resonated with. So I think the advice is we often regret what we haven't done than what we have done. And so go forth and sail. I think this is a mantra of mine to literally, it has given me a lot of courage to do things and to say yes to opportunities that I didn't feel completely confident about, but I really desired. So I think, life is too short. Life passes by in a wink. So, but then it makes life very interesting because we can afford to make mistakes. We can afford to just dare to live the life that we really want because it's going to be over before we know it. So I would just encourage all the listeners, the viewers, just go forth because there was this question, what would you like to do with your wildly fascinating life? Go do it.
Thank you so much, Karen. Really appreciate you joining us. I'm sure there's so many great pieces of guidance and wisdom and experience. We really appreciate you talking to us today. Thank you so much.
Saima, I must say you have asked some of the best questions. Thank you for having such a stimulating conversation with me, and a big thank you to all those who are watching this as well.